Hello, I'm Aaron Gross. I'm a professor at Wesley Seminary, Indiana Wesleyan University. I teach preaching and pastoral leadership. I'm also the director of the Doctor of Ministry program. At this year's conference, I'm going to be presenting a paper called From Pathology to Presence, Integrating Modern Trauma Theory with the Johannine Resurrection. I spent the last 20 years of my life working with individuals who struggle with chemical addiction. I've got a heart for the chemically addicted as long as I can remember. In my dissertation work, I researched the effects of addiction and cognitive abilities of those who struggle with chemical addiction. During my research, I found that trauma was the leading cause of chemical addiction in individuals. Many who struggle with addictive disorders and tendencies can point to a time in their life when great trauma led them into the lifestyle. I began to wonder, what does the Bible teach about trauma? The first story that came to mind was in the book of John, chapter 20, when the disciples were hiding in the upper room. I mean, it's resurrection day. Jesus is alive. The women have told the disciples. Peter and John have seen the empty tomb, and yet the disciples are hiding, as it says in John chapter 20, verse 19, behind locked doors. Why were the disciples hiding behind locked doors? You know, the optimism in me wants to say, hey, what's wrong with you guys? Jesus is alive. And I think that if I'd have been Jesus, I'd have probably went up and kicked the door down instead of walked through it and said to the disciples, what is wrong with you guys? Get out there and tell them the good news. I'm alive. What is wrong with you? That's a statement that modern trauma theorists consider an old model of therapy. Many would go to a counselor to find out what was wrong with them. Modern trauma theory takes on a different approach. The new question that therapists ask is, what happened to you? As the cause and effect of trauma is being researched, new understanding of how therapists can help individuals who've experienced trauma have changed. And the question that therapists explore in modern trauma theory is, what happened to you? Do you ever wonder why Jesus showed his hands inside to the disciples? Is it to prove to the disciples that he is who he says he is? Or maybe it's to show them the trauma that they experienced at the hands of the Romans. Maybe it's to express that Jesus understands that they have experienced a traumatic event and Jesus understands where they're at. Could it be that Jesus showed them the reason for their locked doors? You see, the Gospel of John is filled with trauma stories. The woman at the well and her trauma at the hands of men. The woman caught in the act of adultery and the trauma of being dragged into the street. The man who had been an invalid for 38 years and the trauma of his condition. And then the trauma of what he went through trying to get into the waters as it was stirred. How does Jesus deal with those who've experienced the effects of trauma? What do we need to learn about trauma as those preaching to the traumatized in this world? And how can we connect individuals in our congregations to those who were impacted by trauma in the scriptures? Maybe, just maybe, there's some person in John that the people can really relate to because they understand the trauma that these individuals have experienced. These are the questions this paper poses and hopes to answer.